everybody. Thank you and welcome to the Kimberly Cloud Show. I'm your host, Kimberly Cloud. I have a very special guest here for the show today. Can you go ahead and announce to the world who you are and where you're calling from?
Hi, my name is Lani Lanchester, and I'm calling from California. I am a teacher in California, but what's new is I've written a book called Learning to Listen to Palestine. And this is a book that is a personal quest. It's Learning to Listen to Palestine, a personal quest, because this is my personal quest. At one point in my life, I was raised a Zionist Christian, and I was unable to listen to Palestine. The name Palestine was a word that triggered me that I just really couldn't get past. And how did that happen? Somehow in my life, I was conditioned to see to turn away when I saw the word Palestine.
And how did you come out of that? What happened? How did you grow?
Thank you for that question. Yes, well, for one thing, I'll tell you how bad it was. Is I had a friend when we worked at the same university in Texas, and I respected him in every way. But he had written a book about Palestine that said Palestine on the front. And I was a voracious reader. I read everything. And it was so exciting to meet an author. But yet, I would not read his book because I couldn't get past that word Palestine. But what happened?
Stigma. Before you continue, what was the stigma with Palestine that you were raised to think about?
That's yes. I was raised a Zionist, and Zionism stands on certain principles that about Israel. And we were taught that Israel is a modern miracle, that they were surrounded by nations and almost didn't come to birth. But God swooped in and he rescued this young nation. And so it's almost mythological how exciting Zionism was to me and Israel was to me. But I had been conditioned not to look at Palestine because Palestinians were living in the land before Israel was born, and they had to be forced out in order for Israel to exist. And there were a lot of stories that I was told as a Christian. I was told that Palestine was a land without a people, and the Jews were a people without a land. And that's kind of the basis, but it wasn't true. It wasn't true at all. In fact, 750,000 Palestinians were forced out of the land. So how did this happen? And how can it be that a Christian like me was so accepting of that? Because I am of the people of Jesus. I believe that we are supposed to love our neighbor as ourselves. I believe that we are even supposed to love our enemy. So how did I accept this? And blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. So how was it that I accepted this? There was something wrong, and it took me a while to see this. And so what I've come to find out is that the Palestinian people have been dehumanized. Otherwise, I would not accept this at all. There's no way that I could have accepted this.
What religion was the people that kicked out 750,000 Palestinians? What religion were they?
Well, they're primarily Jews. And this was after World War II, when there were a lot of displaced Jews from Europe. And so what happened in 1937, the British, who had the British mandate over Palestine at the time, and they were ruling Palestine from World War I to World War II. And they promised in 1937 a homeland to the Jews in Palestine. But they also, in the same year, promised a homeland to the Arabs, to the Palestinians in the same area. So they promised the same land to both people without any rules. And so after World War II, when there were so many displaced Jews from Europe, this is something that came from the United Nations. This was the UN mandate to divide up the land of Palestine and give part of the land to Palestinians. I mean, to the Jews, the Palestinian land to the Jews. But this had to force people off of their own land. They had agriculture, they had olive trees and citrus, and they had been living there for thousands of years. And suddenly, these homes that they could trace their lineage back for hundreds and even thousands of years, they were being forced off the land.
So
and
it was kind of like political, you would think.
Yes, there was a lot of politics involved in it. And this is what is kind of a misconception about Zionism. A lot of Christians, we believe, that see Zionism as almost a religious thing, but it really is a political thing. So what is important in order to hear about what's happening in Israel and Palestine is to be able to humanize the Palestinian people. And one thing that people don't realize is we always think of Palestinians as repressing women and these stereotypes of terrorism. And what I found as I traveled through Israel and Palestine, what I did is I rented a little cart and I drove around all over, and everywhere I stopped, I just met people. And it came from kind of a crisis. The reason that I went to Israel was really surprising. I went there because I wanted to go to Hawaii to sit on a beach and cry. I had had my heart broken. And I didn't want to be around family because they were all going to tell me how to fix this. Some problems in my family. And Christmas was coming up. And I just needed to cry. And so I had a Palestinian friend at this point. He and I had become friends over social media for about a year. And I told him that I was going to go to Hawaii, sit on a beach and cry. Why would you do that? Why would you go to Hawaii to be miserable? And I'm like, he goes, you come to Israel. You come to Israel and you walk in the steps of Jesus. And if you need a beach to cry on, we've got a beach.
I like that.
So that's what I did. Is he helped me make an itinerary of where I could drive to, what I should see. And I just rented a car and I drove from place to place to place to place. And everywhere I went, I met Palestinian Christians. And they surprised me and told me stories that I'd never heard before. But it started before I went. Before I went, my dad didn't want me to go. He was real concerned because I was going to be alone. I wasn't in a tour group. I didn't have all these safety and security on this. So I'm American. What could happen, right? So I did a Google search of Israel-Palestinian conflict and Christians, and I got a hit. And it was a woman who was almost exactly my age. That's when I learned about Shireen Abu Akleh. She was a Palestinian Christian who had her American citizenship. She had moved to America, went to school here, worked here, but then felt called to go back to Israel and Palestine and to show the stories of what was happening in Palestine to the West. So she worked for Al Jazeera. But what happened was the summer before I went to Israel, it was May 11th, 2022. She was in Jenin, a Palestinian village, with other press. And down the road was an Israeli armored vehicle. And they didn't know why they were there. They're usually only there if they're going to arrest somebody. Or some sort of action was going on. And so they were doing just as they were supposed to do. She had her press jacket on that says press across the front, her press helmet, and they walk slowly in pairs with their hands like this to show that they are press. and she was targeted by a sniper and shot in the head by the Israeli Defense Force. Yeah. And so I was shocked by this because this made no sense to me because I'd never heard of it. This happened just the summer before. And you remember that year was when the basketball star went into Russia?
Yeah, I remember. Brittany
And we heard,
something.
yes, and she had some illegal cannabis with her.
Yeah.
And we heard that in the news all the time. And the government was trying to help her get out. Our government was coming to her aid, and the press was on it all the time. And I didn't understand why I had never heard about Shireen, because here, this woman, she was an American, and she was targeted unjustly and shot in the head.
I don't mean to cut you off, but what I have to say about Brittany Griner, if that's her name, I believe that is her name.
Yeah, that's her.
She was briefed very thoroughly before she went to Russia with that illegal cannabis. And I feel like, you know, they rushed to her aid. She got a second chance, but they rushed to her aid a little too much when, like you said, there's people trying to put good information to give good information to America about what's going on where they used to live, and now she's dead. She has no voice. She has no voice.
Exactly. And so our government should have rushed to her aid and said and tried to bring justice to Shireen, but they did nothing. In fact, it was suppressed by the Biden administration. I didn't understand this at the time. I was so confused. And so then I looked at the press, and why didn't the press cover this? She was one of their own, and they did nothing about this. So this confused me. I didn't understand the press. So there's something wrong with the press. There's something wrong with our government. And the IDF, I always saw Israel as having this Israeli Defense Force, this force that was supposed to keep people safe. It's bringing all of these Jews in from who had no safe place to go and giving them this safe place and making this safe haven. But yet here we have an innocent woman who is only trying to do good, who is shot in the head. And the IDF, they denied it for a while, but then they admitted to it because there were 8 tight shots. It was a sniper, and it was an Israeli bullet. And so it was definitely them, and they admitted to it, but they would never turn over the soldier who did it. There was no justice. So I wasn't even sure if I should go at this point, because suddenly I realized I didn't understand anything about Israel. All I thought I knew about Israel from my upbringing was wrong. So I prayed about it, and I asked God, should I even go? And, you know, I heard him clearly tell me I should go. And I asked him, why? And he said, to listen. So every time I met a Palestinian and they'd ask me, why are you here traveling by yourself? I'd say, to listen. And they'd lock eyes with me and they go, oh. And they would sit me down and they would serve me tea or coffee, and they start telling me stories because they had all of these stories that needed to be told. And nobody was listening. So this is why it's called learning to listen. The first thing that happened is these people are humanized to me. Some people, most people are not wearing the hijabs. They're families just like me and you, and they love their families. I met a lot of Christians and I learned about things like church burnings in Israel. And these churches are being burnt not by Muslims. That's what we would think. That would be the Palestinians. They're being burnt by the Israelis, Israeli settlers. And so that shocked me. So eventually I did meet my friend who invited me to Israel in Nazareth, and he took me to the Church of the Beatitudes, where Jesus taught the Sermon on the Mount. And so it's a really cool drive. We drive up this winding path, this winding road up, and as you look off this way, you see the Galilee, Sea of Galilee. And over this way, it's the Jordan Valley. Can you imagine? And off this way, it's the Golan Heights. And so my friend is pointing all of this out to me, and I'm just getting excited, because I've been raised Christian and I've read about this all of my life. I've read about these things in the news, but I'm seeing it. I've seen it all at once. And I said something very ignorant.
What? What'd you say?
I said, there must have been something righteous about 1948, the year Israel was born. And he pulled over the car. He stopped the car, pulled over the car, and said, righteous? Righteous? There were 530 villages destroyed. 750,000 people lost their homes. There were murders and rapes. And now the Israelis cover these destroyed villages with trees to cover the evidence. And I'd never heard any of this before. He called it the Nakba. And Nakba in Arabic means the catastrophe. And this is a term I never heard before, but to the Muslims, this is, or to not the Muslims, to the Palestinians, because some of them are Christian. My friend is Christian. This means the catastrophe. It's almost like their Holocaust. And what I heard from him, I knew I was there to listen. So I asked him, I've never heard this before. Tell me about this. And he was angry. He couldn't talk. And so what I heard is we'd been friends for a year, and I had no idea about this trauma his family had gone through. Mm-hmm. I'm a Christian, and we share this faith, and I had no idea of what Christians had gone through, that there were Christian villages that had been destroyed then too, and people were forced out. And I felt how alone it must feel to have this friendship and be in Palestine and be a Palestinian, and the whole world is ignoring what happened.
Why
so the next year,
they're ignoring. Why do you think that they're ignoring?
I think there's been a lot of conditioning. I think there's been a lot of propaganda that has taught us otherwise. For instance, I have this term in my head, a land without a people and a people without a land. That is something that was in my head that isn't true at all. I was always told that there was this great battle in May 14th, 1948 for Israel to become a nation. And 7 nations came against them, and they were unequally matched. Well, it's not really true, because the ethnic cleansing of this land started in 1947, not 1948. And what the Israelis would do is they would come around a village and like this, surround a village with one open side, so it's like kind of like a C. And they would blow up a few houses with dynamite with people still in them. And they would scare everybody, get everybody on the street, and then they would separate the men of certain age, and they would pull out a few and they would kill them. So they're terrorized, and then drive the people out. And that's how they ethnically cleansed 530 villages. And this started not in 1948, but 1947. So by the time the 7 nations in May 14th, 1948 came to the aid of the Palestinians, most of this had been done. And the way I learned about this, it took me a year to learn about this, but the way I learned about this was when I found Elon Poppy's book. And Elon Poppy, he's actually a Jewish Israeli and a historian. And he discovered this by reading historical documents that had been unsealed in the early 80s. And these were like Ben Gurion and the first prime minister of Israel and other leaders in Israel. Anyway, so he pieced original documents together and tells the story, village by village, how these villages were destroyed. And so this isn't a righteous act that I was raised to believe it was. This is why it was my ignorance. And instead, there's so many other stories that have been told about that time to make it seem like this joyous, miraculous, wonderful thing, where it wasn't. There was a lot of trauma, a lot of dramatic, horrible things that happened. And if we don't learn to listen to the Palestinians, these stories get buried, and the pain of this people is buried. And that is not loving my neighbor.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Gaza, and what's going on now. What is your thoughts on that? And then I have a couple of more questions for you.
Yeah, Gaza breaks my heart. And it didn't surprise me. When I'll tell you the day that so October 7th was when this happened. It started. What's going on currently? That night, I heard a pounding on my door, and I woke up and I knew nobody was there. I knew I was being woken up to pray, and I didn't know. So I just started, the first thought was to pray for my friends, my Palestinian friends in Israel and in Palestine. And so I woke up and I started praying for them. I prayed for my daughters. I prayed for my dad. And then I went back and prayed for my Palestinian friends again. And then I went to sleep. And the next morning, I'd been up for a while doing Bible study or something. And my mom called me and she's, Lani, have you seen what's happened? And I turned on the news and I saw what had happened with the Palestinians attacking the village. And I wasn't surprised, because I knew that the trauma that so many people carry, and some people are going to react out of hate and aggression.
Before you continue, do you think that they're trying to suppress the history and erase the history of what happened by killing like the elderly, the baby boomers, and even whoever's in their path, just to suppress the history of what's been going on there?
There's a big move to suppress the history. That's a good question, because they even blew up museums and things that they weren't housing people or anything. They blew up the museums, they blew up the universities, the schools, any place that has knowledge stored, they are destroying. That is absolutely true. But anyway, October 7th was a terrible day, but I'm gonna tell you about my worst day. It was October 14th. And on October 14th, that was the day my dad died.
I'm sorry to hear that.
And so I got a call that my dad was in the hospital and he had an episode. And so I needed to get to the hospital to see him. And as I was getting ready to go, I got another call. And my friend and boss, who had been battling cancer, she died that morning too. So I was brokenhearted, and in a way that I had never been before, because I'd already been so softened by what was going on in Gaza. And I was seeing this carpet bombing starting to happen. And so I was on the ground crying. I was making a keening sound. I'd never made that sound before. And I couldn't stop. So I called my Palestinian friend in Nazareth and I told him what was going on. And I told him I need to get to the hospital, but I can't stop crying. And he said, only prayer helps right now. I'm praying for you. And so I pulled it together and I got in the car and I went. And for some courage and some uplifting, trying to get myself there, I turned on Christian radio to try to help me. And what I heard was this: if I were Netanyahu, I would carpet bomb the whole thing. I'd squeegee it clean and start over. And then these guys, as they were talking on this talk show, they kind of backed off and then, yeah, women and children would get killed. That would be awful. But no. And then they doubled down on it. And they said, we need to send a clear message to Hezbollah, Iran, Hamas. And this is what we need to do. Yep, that's what I would do. That's what I would do. So on that day, I knew. So on that day, I knew that this would be a genocide.
Yeah.
Because if my people are willing to support, if the Christians are willing to support a genocide, Netanyahu would make it a genocide. They have been dehumanized. But our job is to love them. So that was the day I really broke. And I started writing after that, really honestly, about, I didn't understand what my trips to Israel and Palestine, and I went to Jordan also, were all about until this moment. And I started writing really honestly through my pain. And I realized that we need to love them as we were taught to love. And that listening to Palestine isn't an easy thing. It's something that we have to learn how to do. It takes practice and it takes intentionality. And it takes us turning back to the teachings of Jesus. And we can't look at the Zionism without looking at the teachings of Jesus. Because if you look at the teachings of Jesus, all of Zionism falls apart. And it falls apart even just with the Lord's Prayer. When I was in Israel, at one point, I went to a church on the Mount of Olives. So I walked up this mountain to several churches, and one church in particular called Pater Noster, and it means Our Father. And this is where Jesus taught his disciples how to pray. And so it's quite a hike. And so I'd hiked up this mountain, and I was sitting there on a bench resting after going through this church. And in this church, there are 172 plaques that all have the Lord's Prayer in a different language.
Oh my God, that is so cool.
It is so cool. Yes, exactly. And so as I'm sitting here writing it out in English, I'm realizing this is the antithesis of the Tower of Babel, where the whole world was divided by humans wanting to make a name for themselves. Here we have this prayer that's uniting us all with one Father. So it's Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name instead of our name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So we're taught to pray God's kingdom would come on earth as it is in heaven. So as in heaven, we're not divided by race, religion. We're not divided by ethnic groups or the way we eat or the way we dress. We're one people with one Father. And then
I think that with Babel, I think that's an intention of a challenge to bring us all back together as one. What do you think?
I absolutely. And we really should be. And this is something that we as Christians should see as the intention of Jesus, even just in this one prayer. And the next thing he says is, give us this day our daily bread. So we have one provider, and that's God. So we shouldn't be fighting over resources. Instead, we should be trusting God with our resources and being able to be free with these things because they all came from God. Then is the heart of it. Forgive us our sins as we forgive those who've sinned against us. And that is the heart of peace. Yeah. That's the peace movement in it all. And there's a book, it's by Desmond Tutu, that after my dad died, I was really broken. And my sister gave me this book called The Book of Forgiving by Desmond Tutu. And it goes through these steps of forgiving. And it starts with listening to other people's stories and to tell your story and to be listened to. So I realized at this point as I was writing that all of these stories I was listening to, I was bringing healing to people just by listening to their stories. And if we want to bring peace, if we want to be peacemakers, we need to be willing to listen to the Palestinian stories and to their trauma. And if we don't, what we end up having is acts of aggression where that we do fear. But we don't need to fear these things. Instead, we should be living lives of helping people to heal. And this also heals our own souls.
If somebody's not being heard for like centuries, they're going to get mad and they're going to rebel to get your attention. So I kind of see what's going on, but I just wish that we can have a trust factor where, you know, we get to learn their culture more so that they can trust us and we can trust them, and it'll be peace.
Yes, there's a story that I like to tell from my classroom that's just about this. When I taught in Texas, I used to have a lot of African American students who didn't trust me because I look like this. You know, something about me made them not trust me. And but there's only one race. There's only one race because I teach biology, and there's only the human race. So everything we see with skin color and things like that, it's just make believe.
Superficial, like,
yes, yeah. Exactly. But because of the way they've been treated in the past, they're gonna look at me and not trust me. And so I have to win their trust. And so eventually, and I would work at it. And sometimes there'd be a student who I just couldn't win their trust. And eventually we would lock heads and we couldn't move forward or backward. And it would even really cause difficulty in the classroom. So I do the thing that they hate this. I tell them in the hall. And they don't want to go in the hall because this is where a teacher in the past who is likely gotten away from the rest of the classroom, and they can do anything in the hall. They can say horrible things to them in the hall. They can dehumanize them. But that's awful. So that is not what I do. I would take them in the hall and I'd tell them, lean against the wall. I'm angry right now. We didn't end up in the hall until I'm angry. But I'd tell them, lean against the wall. And then I would just lean next to them. And they know I'm angry. And they go, what? They want it over with. They want to get onto it. They're have anxiety and they have this fight or flight reaction right now. And I tell them, just lean. We're going to lean until I calm down. And they go, oh. And then after I'm calm and I feel myself again, and now instead of being anxious, they're curious about what is she going to do? And I turn to them and I say, I love you. And there's no reason why I should be in this job if I didn't love you. That's the most important job that I have. But my job is to give you the best outcome possible. We're not working well together. And in order to give you the best outcome possible, we need to work well. They're in shock at this point. But they're also, they believe me. And so I at that point have to be willing to hear their story. And if I listen to their story at that point, it brings healing to them. It brings understanding to me. It also, I won't do that again because, okay, I understand that hurt you. I won't do that again. And I have to be willing to be vulnerable also and to be at fault. And this builds trust. And after that student and I can do anything together for the rest of the year.
You know, sometimes children are around other children, they kind of like show out, but when they're alone with the adult and you try to get them to understand, it's like they understand now. They understand that you're being honest and you want to hear their story, and that opens them up to, trust.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask you, well said, and I hope that it continues. Are you still teaching, by the way?
I am. I'm teaching in California. I have 3 campuses, and I teach all kinds of students, and they give me ears to hear also, because I get these amazing opportunities to hear stories from all over the world from students.
Good. And where do you see yourself going in the future with your book? Can you give me an excerpt from your book and then tell me where you're going in the future? Because we're closing out.
Okay. Well, I hope to start a peace movement. Where did I put my book? I hope to start a peace movement with this book. Because listening, in order to have peace, we have to love each other. And we cannot love each other if we're not willing to listen. So I really do hope to reach into the Christian community and to give people ears to hear, and to listen to the Palestinians and make connections between Palestinians and people who have had trouble listening to Palestinians before because somehow they have been triggered by this word, Palestine. And then I know that what's happening in Gaza is so awful, so incredibly awful, that and there's so much trauma occurring right now that I hope to be someone who helps bring restoration and healing to Gaza and to Palestine, because I've cried every day for the past 290 some days of this conflict. And it's not a conflict, it's a genocide.
You know, how are you going to implement that to get it on to like a mainstream show, you know, like CNN or ABC, like a mainstream? How will you implement that to get your word out?
Well, as I told you in the story about Shireen Abu Akleh, her story didn't make it mainstream. How do you make this mainstream if her story couldn't make it mainstream?
Sure.
I think this is going to be a grassroots effort. This is going to be one person handing the book to another person, to another person. However, I did start a podcast also. And my podcast is Learning to Listen to Palestine. And I would encourage people to come in. And what I'm trying to do is give Palestinians a voice. I'm trying to bring Palestinians into this program, to where they can tell their stories about their families, their culture, their jobs, their education. It's remarkable and beautiful, and we need to humanize them first. And then they also get opportunities to share about their trauma. It's the same path that I went through, was I was driving through Israel and Palestine and Jordan, and I was listening. It gives people the opportunity to do this in an easy way. And then I encourage people to reach out to your neighbors. You have neighbors who are Palestinian. They have been displaced to all over the world. And if you're willing to listen, you're going to find them. And when you meet them, and they're so willing to tell their story, that they're going to want to tell you their story, and you're going to find this friendship. And if we have this friendship growing, you see, this is the beginning of a peace movement. Peace movements do not start on CNN. Peace movements start in conversations, in kitchens and cafes, and even between you and me right now.
Thank you. How can the people reach you, Lani?
I am easily reached on Facebook, so I encourage you to follow me on Facebook. My website is listentopalestine.com. My email and my contact information is there as well. My podcast is called Learning to Listen to Palestine. And so I'd love for people to reach me there. If you are Palestinian and you want to tell your story, I would love to tell your story on my podcast. Let you tell your story on my podcast. And I want to model to people how to listen rather than injecting Western thoughts when something doesn't stick. I want to show people how to ask a question, a clarifying question, so we can understand things that we don't understand. For instance, when my friend said there are 530 villages destroyed, I didn't understand this. It had no place in my brain to stick. So I had to learn, and I had to ask questions, and then I had to research and study. Yeah. So if any of this has no place for it to stick in your head because this is new to you, I encourage you to reach out to me and to read my book. Here it is. It's called Learning to Listen to Palestine. There's a lot of stories that will help you. And what I did is I listened to the stories of the Palestinians that I met. I wrote these stories down along with the research that I did following up. That will help you a lot. The links to the research is in here in the back. There's a lot of research in here, and it gives you more questions, more ways of finding more information. It gives you several books to read. This one, I think, is a book that all Americans should read. This is not just about Palestine, but this is about South Africa. And it's about how South Africa found healing. If South Africans can find healing, you know what? World peace is possible. So that's an exciting thing. And then this one is The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine by Ilan Pappé. Again, he was a Jewish Israeli historian. This is an incredible book, a very difficult book to read in some ways. It's also available on tape if you, and that's one of the right ways I've read it. And then this one is by a Palestinian Christian called Yohanna Catenaccio. I say his name poorly sometimes. My Arabic is not fantastic. But it's called The Land of Christ, A Palestinian's Cry. And this book shows the spirit of the Palestinians and how they get so much from their faith. The Christians show how their love for each other is what gives them their tenacity and their resilience and their love, and for their incredible families. So I encourage you to learn to listen, to dig a little bit deeper into the Palestinian issue, because we are not being fed this by CNN. We are not being fed this by the main news media. You have to look for it, and we have to develop.
One day it's going to come out, and it takes people to pass in a torch, like you said, to have this come out. It's people watching now that didn't know. I didn't know everything. So I know a little bit more now because of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. That means a lot to me. That's incredible.
Can you stay on the line? Stay on the line for a second. Thank you guys for joining the show and watching the show. You all take care, be safe, and I'll be back on here later. Thank you.